That's better. I'm live. I feel like I've got the camera in the wrong spot. Hello. Fiona, I saw your picture on Instagram already. It looks delicious. Hello, Craig. Craig, you've got the Coteau de la Biche. Well done. Peter and Karen, hello. I know that you had trouble getting a Vouvray, but you've got something delicious anyway. Who else is here? Paul and Rose, no luck on the Vouvray. Milton Chenin Blanc, yum. That's a delicious wine. Kay's got the Famille Bougrier Vouvray Sec, yum. Hello, David. Emily and Kevin are there. Dan's at Benton Square. Didn't have a Vouvray. I'm so sorry. Nigel's hooked you up with a South African Chenin Blanc and a Swan Valley Chenin Blanc to compare. Well, that's good. We can talk all about Chenin Blanc. Oh, Jeff and Sue, hi. Jeff, I think you did take that photo, and Sue's in there, and that was a lovely trip. Feels like a long time ago now. So I've got I realised after I sent out that tart recipe, which funnily enough I hadn't made before, that it was actually quite a lot of work involved when I made it last night. So I apologise. Anyone who's made it, I know Sue made it because you had time. Anyone else who's made it, I hope it's delicious. It smells pretty good. We've just reheated it and Mum's going to bring me in a chunk or a slice or some crumbles. I'm not quite sure how short my short crust pastry ended up being. It feels a bit crumbly to me. Anyway, I've got wine, so that's the most important thing. Now I've got, I don't have the Coteau de la Biche, but I think that's a beautiful wine. Kay, good work. Oh, you did too. You sent me the photo. Sorry, I did see it. It looks delicious. Alison, you've got the bitch wine, Coteau de la Biche. Well, and actually, biche in French doesn't mean bitch. It means female deer or doe. So it's a term of endearment in French to say ma biche. Kay used frozen pastry cases, so cheated. That's all good. So yes. So la biche, ma biche is a term of endearment in French, which means my little doe, which I think is rather lovely. It sounds better in French because everything always sounds better in French. Hello, Cotty and John, how are you going? All right, so I don't have the Coteau de la Biche. I have also from Domaine Pichot their demi-sec, which is called Clos Berger, which is the Clos of the Shepherd. So they've got lovely names for their wines. They've also got beautiful different coloured labels for each of their wines. The Clos de la Biche has got sort of a creamy coloured label. This has got this lovely violet label, demi-sec. 2016, I bought it from a friend of mine who happened to have a little stash. David and Fiona have the Coteau de la Biche as well. Fantastic. Hello, Andrew and Shell. Andrew visited Prince Wine Store and I picked up a range of delights from various vendors. Excellent. Which wine are you drinking? I also found in our fridge the Domaine Pichot wine fridge, and I think this must have been a purchase from our distributor who also brings in Domaine Pichot. Le Marigny 2022. It just says Vouvray on the label, which I think is interesting because usually these days I was under the impression that they would give you an idea of the level of sweetness, and I just Googled it quickly and I believe it's quite a sweet version. So we're not going to open this one today. We're going to keep this for another time. Shell, you've got the Pinot Noir, and I think that's one of the favourites of the Prince Wine Store. They bring that in themselves. David and Fiona also have the L'Electron Libre Vouvray. Fantastic. So I think there would be a lot of people drinking Coteau de la Biche, and Craig has got his open and drinking it already, so I better get mine open as well. A lot more full-bodied than you're expecting. Indeed, Craig, we will talk about that. Peter and Karen are in the middle of moving house, and Dan's wasn't helpful. So Chardonnay and Brett's cheese chips, which sounds like a really good house-moving snack. Okay, a lovely corkscrew, very sexy corkscrew on these. It's one of those modern ones with the smooth on the outside. into a glass. I'm using Sangiovese glass today. Maybe a Pinot glass would have been good as well. As I said, mine is a demi-sec style, so it'll have a little bit more sugar in it than some of yours. But I think that it will be delicious, and we'll be able to talk about, sorry, Jill and Richard are having an intense, loud conversation in the kitchen about how long to heat the meat up for the cats in the microwave. They're distracting me. Anyway, cheers, everyone. Here's to Vouvray. It is a beautiful part of the world, and they make amazing wines, and they're sort of under-recognised in Australia, and there's a few reasons for that. Chenin Blanc was grown a lot in Australia in the 70s and 80s, and you see a lot of cheap, cheerful, but not very exciting, tasty Chenin Blanc still coming out of Swan Valley and Western Australia, whereas it tends not to be grown as much over here in the east side of Australia anymore. Shell, you need your Duolingo subscription more. Yes, indeed. Cotty is saying that you were surprised that the 2014 was also under a screw cap. So these guys will have adopted screw caps quite early. I'll find out some more about that actually from Ian, because he, as I said, Ian, our distributor, imports their wine. And I think they put their dry and their demi-sec under screw cap. But one of the reasons that I think this might be a sweetie, this is under cork or maybe Diam, but you can see it's not a screw cap, because this is a style that they would be imagining that people would put down in their cellar for maybe decades. And the French are still not sure whether wine is going to age well under screw cap for a long period of time, particularly if it's got lots of sugar in it. So they're wrong, of course, but they're not prepared to take the advice of we colonials about that. In general, Chenin Blanc, Alison, you tend to find it too floral. I think Australian Chenin Blanc often is too floral. I find good quality Vouvray tends to have some of that floral note. Dear Jill is bringing me my tart.
I'm sorry, our food stylist has gone home tonight. And I don't present things as beautifully as Peter, but Kate made this lovely tart.
Thank you, Jill. I did make it myself, all by myself. Thank you. That looks beautiful. I was a bit worried that she wasn't going to be able to get it out of the tin either, because I gave her the tricky job. So thank you, Mum. Make sure you have some yourself as well, and there's some Chenin Blanc here when you're ready. It does look delicious, doesn't it, Fiona? And I'll just put that time aside because I need that for my osso buco for tomorrow. Lovely garnish. It does look delicious. I'm very pleased with myself. It's a bit squishy in the middle. It looks like it's collapsed a bit. I could have maybe cooked it a bit longer. Anywho, back to the wine, which is something that I'm much more familiar with. Fiona, you happen to have made tarts on the weekend and had leftovers, so you're slumming it with leftover onion goat's cheese tart. Sounds great. So, Jeff, I'll answer that question in a minute. Perfect question. Thank you, Alison. Okay, Jeff, that's a question for about halfway into the tasting. So I'll come back to that. If I haven't answered it in the next 15, 20 minutes, ask me again. Or just say, Kate, answer my question. Cotty, you think you're drinking this just in time? I think you would be surprised. These wines age incredibly well. So if it's been stored well, then Cotty, is yours the Coteau de la Biche? I can't remember what you said, that you've got 2014 under screw cap, but is it a dry style? So, okay, let's go back a step and let's taste what we're tasting. We're all tasting different things, but there'll be some similarity because we're looking at Chenin Blanc. Yes, Coteau de la Biche. Sorry, I just had to have a little sip. So the cool thing about Chenin Blanc from Vouvray is that it has an appley fruit character to it, for me, it's more like yellow apple than green apple. I think that Riesling from a cool climate tends to have a green apple, Granny Smith kind of character, whereas Chenin Blanc from Vouvray has more of kind of a yellow, golden delicious kind of apple flavour to it. A little bit of Nashi pear as well, Fiona, for sure. And it's a grape variety when it's grown in the Loire, particularly in Vouvray. It holds its acid incredibly well. So you end up, whether you've got a dry style or a really sweet style or anything in between, one of the characteristics of Chenin Blanc from Vouvray is that it will have high acid. And that acid has a bit of a bitterness to it that is unique to Chenin Blanc as a grape variety. I think that's one of the reasons that it was grown in Australia as well, because it tends to hold its acid pretty well. And in South Africa, where it has much more success than it's had in Australia. In South Africa, they're growing it in a much hotter climate. So I can't remember who said they were drinking South African Chenin Blanc, but if you're drinking, Kevin and Emily are drinking South African Chenin Blanc, I think. So that wine will be much richer and riper and look almost like Chardonnay, I imagine. So let's come back to these Pichot wines and dry Vouvray in general. So your Coteau de la Biche, if that's what you're drinking, which a lot of people are, will be bone dry or close to. They call it sec. It can have up to about, I think in Vouvray, it's like 8 grams per litre. They still call dry because the acid's so high. Acid and sugar hide each other. So your wine, particularly if it's a young version of the Coteau de la Biche, will be pretty tangy. It'll have, Craig's saying lemon curd flavours, so yummy, absolutely. Beautiful lemon curd characters, really lovely apple. When it's young, it'll be fresh apple. As it gets older, the apple will develop to being sort of dried apple, sometimes baked apple, and the spice and the honey will come through. Even in the dry wine, you'll smell honey characters as the wine ages. So Connie and John, with your 14, I imagine that it'll be a bit more honeyed, it'll be a bit less fruit driven, but they also, all of these Vouvrays have a little earthy kind of minerality to them, which stops them from being super floral or super fruity and gives them this kind of really attractive savouriness, even the sweet ones, which is sort of a weird thing to say, but it kind of works with the wine. My wine is, as I said, a demi-sec style. So I reckon it's got, I should have looked up before I came on, but I didn't. I think it would have about somewhere between sort of 15 and 20 grams per litre of sugar, maybe even a little bit more. When I taste it, it tastes a little bit fruitier than a dry style, but it does not taste sweet at all. Until you kind of swirl it around your mouth and get it right on the front of your tongue, and then you can just taste it, just almost the ghost of sweetness in that wine, because it's got so much acid that the acid's just kind of soaking up the sugar, and it just, the sugar takes away the bitterness that you get from a really dry style of Chenin Blanc. So, okay, here you go, Jill. Shell is having conniptions. Oh my God, Kate, complete accident, but the Coteau de la Biche is amazing with halloumi and green pea curry pie. Delicious. Brings out the cumin and other spices beautifully. This is the other thing, that a lot of these wines from the Loire can cope with spice really nicely. A classic match to a Vouvray, whether it be a dry or a demi-sec style, is, as I said to you in the email, goat's cheese, hence why we have this tart going on. Yep, that's the one, Dad. It's got a screw cap on it. So goat's cheese is fantastic with these wines, as is caramelized onion, so hence my suggestion. But they also talk about seafood. So with the dry style, with the Coteau de la Biche, you could just have some fresh oysters, which are beautiful at the moment. In fact, we're going to talk about oysters in the next sometime in the next few weeks, possibly even next week. Anyway, we'll leave that in the future for the moment. Oysters, scallops, seared scallops in butter are beautiful with the dry style and the demi-sec style of this wine because, as I say, the demi-sec is not particularly sweet. It's just got a little touch of sugar to soften it, make it a little bit more approachable. And other sort of white seafood. So in the Loire, they like eel. Eel works very well with the richer versions of these wines. So just depending on, what sort of style of Vouvray you're drinking, how old it is. Another really classic match is really old Vouvray with goat's cheese and honey drizzled over the top, which is why I said if you couldn't be bothered cooking and you couldn't find yourselves a goat's cheese tart to just buy and heat up, just some crusty bread, some goat's cheese, a soft goat's cheese, or even a dry crumbly goat's cheese on the bread with beautiful honey drizzled over the top with an aged Vouvray. And when I'm saying aged, Cotty, you were saying that your 2014 you thought might be getting close to the end. I've had Vouvray that's 20, 30, 40 years old, and it ages very, very slowly, and it ages very, very well. So I imagine that your wine might be looking sort of, I'd be interested to hear a little bit of a description of how it's kind of looking, Cotty, but I reckon it's probably freshening up in the glass is my prediction, and will be looking younger as it gets more air in it, because that's another tricky thing about Vouvray. It tends to look a bit musty when you first open it and pour it. And I specifically didn't talk to you about decanting it because I wanted you to see that. And then as it opens up with air, then you get more of the fruit coming forward and the minerality kind of steps back a little bit, and with a little bit of age. Ours is a 16, so it's got enough age to have a little bit of honey development in it without too much. Oh, it's Karen's birthday. Happy birthday, Karen. Cheers. So Joan got her oysters. Fantastic. I can imagine they would work beautifully with that wine, Craig. Is it not drinking well, Cotty? Hopefully, maybe it might not be in great condition either. That would be a shame. But, every now and again, the seal doesn't work in a screw cap, so that would be a shame. So David Inchley has said the Domaine Pichot L'Electron Libre has so much apricot skin, think it's 7 grams, tastes much sweeter than La Biche. Sure. So La Biche will be kind of, even with a little bit of bottle age, even with sort of 10, 15 years bottle age, the La Biche will be quite tight and savoury and earthy for a really long time in the glass. And that's why it works. It actually works, and lots of acid, which is why it works really well with oysters. But also the saltiness and the tanginess of goat's cheese should bring out some of the fruit. So if you haven't started eating yet and you're finding your dry Chenin Blanc from the Loire, from Vouvray, to be a bit of a challenge, maybe get some food on your fork and see if that helps. Now, Jill and Richard are eating and drinking. How's the food and wine match, Mum and Dad? Exceptionally good is the response from down the other side of the room. Hang on a sec. I better put some food in my mouth and find out. Yum. I love everything about this tart. The pastry's beautiful. Thank you very much. I'm a bit of a beginner at pastry, so probably if I think about it too much, I'd stuff it up, but I just kind of whacked it together. The pastry's lovely and short and crumbly, and the flavours of caramelized onion with thyme through it. A little bit of thyme goes a long way, and I think it's rather lovely. Nice crunchy pastry, buttery. The saltiness of the goat's cheese and the tanginess of the goat's cheese works really well. And then it's got sort of that eggy, quiche kind of top on it, which just brings it all together. It's really yum. Okay. A very good reason for oysters and wine, Karen, absolutely. So Emily's getting more honey from her South African wine than the Swan Valley Chenin Blanc, and there's a reason for that. Even today in Australia, we have a tendency, particularly since people kind of had a bit of an adverse reaction to super ripe Chardonnay, Australian winemakers are following a trend at the moment and not all of us are, but sort of bigger company. And a lot of the Swan Valley Chenin Blanc is bigger company stuff. They'll tend to pick the Chenin Blanc. Well, Swan Valley is quite a warm, dry place anyway, so it'll ripen quite fast, but they'll tend to pick it quite early to retain that acidity and to retain freshness. And so the wine will tend to have less honey, less fruitiness, less floral to it. But because of all the sunshine, then you do get a kind of a burst of appliness to the good ones. So I'm not sure which one you've selected, Emily, but hopefully it's a nice one. I think that we still in Australia generally don't give Chenin Blanc enough respect. So it gets treated a bit as a cheap and cheerful sort of, we can overcrop it and pick it early and make lots of fruity, simple wine, which is fine, but you don't get to see the brilliance of the grape variety when you just make wine like that. You have to grow it somewhere where it's a bit harder to grow, and you have smaller crops and you have more intensity. And then when you go to someone, and one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about Domaine Pichot in Vouvray, and there's a lot of really great producers in Vouvray, but I happen to have gone to just a couple of them, and Domaine Pichot I find really impressive because they have a whole range from sparkling all the way through to incredibly sweet Moorooduc style. I love that word, Moorooduc. And that means kind of luscious, sweet wine. And they all have different coloured labels, but it's the same artwork. They've all got different names. And you can really understand why Chenin Blanc is seen as such an amazing grape variety, because depending on how long you leave it on the vine, depending on how much botrytis you get in the wine, because that's the other thing, you can get it really ripe in Vouvray and not have any botrytis, but then if you leave it for even longer, then you can get more botrytis, which will concentrate the sugar and add to the sweetness and richness of the wine. You can make, and you can see that progression of flavour from that sort of fruity, floral, underripe style that goes into the sparkling wines. And that's kind of what I expect to see from most Swan Valley Chenin Blancs that I've tasted, although I'm sure there are some more sort of serious versions of them these days. Just haven't seen very many recently. And then your ripe dry style, like the Clos de la Biche, which is savoury but has that lovely lemon curd character that Craig was talking about. Some nice crunchy yellow apple, a little bit of honey coming on. Oh, Emily, what's Carimbia? You've come up with a descriptor that I don't understand. Is it a floral description, or you'll have to explain for me? Carimbia. Carimbia. Emily will explain, I'm sure. I just have to give her time to type. Kay's wine is lemony with a hint of honey, bit of minerally, yellow apple, really lovely with the tart. Absolutely. So a tart like this has got lots of richness and ripeness and saltiness and sweetness from the caramelized onion. And then you put a lemony, savoury, minerally, slightly honeyed, slightly appley, tangy wine with it, and it just zings really beautifully. So when Craig and I started talking about Vouvray, because you have been asking Craig for quite a long time for us to talk about Vouvray, and you started asking me about it. I seem to remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, that oh, Yusuf, hi. Is Carimbia not a producer from Western Australia? Probably. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, I understand now. Carimbia is the producer. Excellent. I haven't opened that one. We're not opening that one, Dad. I just brought it as a prop. You have to drink the same one again. Dad was hoping that we might have a second bottle open. Craig and I were talking about Chenin Blanc from Vouvray, and you were talking about how you thought it was quite similar flavour profile to aged Pinot Gris. That would be a very interesting tasting to do, to compare your Coteau de la Biche with our Pinot Gris. And I think you'd find there are those sort of honeyed baked apple kind of characters coming through. But I think the big difference is that acid balance with the wine. The Pinot Gris has a lower natural acidity. It's sort of medium acidity, whereas the Clos de la Biche has very high acidity and will seem very tangy and sharp in comparison, which I think would be fun. Okay, thank you, Emily. The comparison would be fun, Peter and Karen. Maybe we can do this year, if we can, she says, having promised 2 or 3 this year. What is happening to this year? It's crazy. It's a little bit of caramelized onion. I don't mind if I do. This year is just flying past at a ridiculous rate of knots. So we'll get something booked in for later in the year. This wine, it's really interesting because it's been in the glass for a while now, and all of a sudden it's just kind of folded in on itself, and the nose has sort of disappeared for a moment. And I find that with these wines, when they're sort of young but not super young. So this wine is 2016, so it's 9 years old, 8 years old. I've got a couple more bottles of this at home, which I'm hoping that I can manage to hide from myself and keep my hands off for at least another 10 years, because I'd love to see how this wine's looking with 10, 15, 20 years age on it. As I say, they age remarkably and astonishingly and surprisingly well. 3 words that pretty much mean the same thing, but I find it really surprising how well these wines age and how slowly these wines age. And I was first introduced to this by a friend, David Chapman, who used to work here. I knew him before he worked here, and he now has a vineyard in Gippsland and makes a wine called Allies, which we'll have to have as one of our guest wines one of these days. We did his red vermouth back during one of the lockdowns many years ago. So Chappie taught me about aged Chenin Blanc from Vouvray. He brought a bottle that was masked, and and served it to me, and I picked it as Chenin Blanc from the Loire Valley, which I thought I was pretty clever to do that, because it had that really distinctive appley honey, high acid, slightly bitter, kind of lemony kind of character. He then asked me how old it was, and I said, well, it feels like it's got a little bit of age, so maybe, I don't know, 8 to 10 years old. And it was 50 years old. It was absolutely incredible. It was and he'd bought it at auction, and that was back in the 90s. And back in the 90s, you could buy super aged Vouvray and other Chenin Blancs from the Loire, from around the area, from Langton's for almost nothing. I managed to pick up a few aged versions after that for sort of $20 a bottle, because nobody really knew what it was or what its value was, and probably thought, oh, white wine that's 30 years old will be completely stuffed. So that was fun back then. I haven't seen any of those wines coming up in auctions recently, and I think that less people have put these wines in their cellar 30 years ago than they had 30 years ago. So 60 years ago, people were buying these wines and cellaring them, whereas 30 years ago they weren't. So that they don't come up anymore. I love the tart too, Jeff. Yeah, that is so delicious. Cotty, your wine is developing. The acid has become dominant in the glass. It was sweeter, aptly to start. I prefer it now. Good. Keep it going. Keep it swirling. Even if the wine is looking a bit weird, maybe try it in a Pinot glass. I mean, traditionally, you would drink Vouvray in this sort of shaped glass, but sometimes putting it in a different shaped glass will give you a very different experience of the wine. So I think it's always good to play. If you've got a Pinot glass to hand, give it a go, see what happens. Let me know. Craig, is there a Grand Cru version of this that is hideously expensive? They wouldn't call it Grand Cru because they don't have that designation in Vouvray. But I'm not sure, but possibly. Domaine Pichot, their most expensive wines that I've seen have been their incredibly sweet wine. And we bought for an event last year, maybe. One of the American Express events that I did. I sourced a wine also from Pichot. It's called Larmes de Bacchus, which means the tears of Bacchus, and it's their sweetest wine. It's heavily botrytized. It's incredibly sweet. It's incredibly sticky and thick as well. And Vintage and Vine, who bring it in, have got a number of different vintages of it. And I cannot for the life of me remember the vintage that we bought, but it was recommended to me by Ian, who tells me about these things, who sells the wines. And it was probably a 2012 or 2011 or something. It had some age on it without being ridiculously old, but it had some significant age on it, and it was delicious. And it cost us at wholesale plus tax, because we were buying it direct from the wholesaler, about $100, $120 a bottle. So when you compare that to other wines from other parts of France that have that level of sweetness and concentration and complexity, like Sauterne, it's pretty good value for money. So, Craig, I don't think there is a Grand Cru version of this that's hideously expensive, but I'm very happy to be corrected on that if you can give me the details. These wines are also great value in France, and that was the other thing that I was going to talk about. Going to the Loire Valley, a lot of people don't go there for the wine. They go there for the beautiful castles and the scenery. They'll do a cruise down the Loire River, and they won't notice that they have all of these beautiful wine regions along the way, unless they're a wine geek. Youssef, Domaine Huet is also another great producer, and I love their wines. David bought the L'Electron Libre, was $90. Francois Chilène at most $110. So these are like high-end, high-quality sort of cult wines from the area. And so that, it sounds like a lot of money to spend on a bottle of wine, but when you think about sort of the cult wines from Burgundy or from Bordeaux coming in at thousands of dollars rather than just over $100, it's pretty amazingly good value, because these wines are not well understood in the marketplace. They're loved by sommeliers because of their acid line and because of their flavor profile. And sommeliers find them really fascinating to match with food, which we've just discovered tonight can be lots of fun and can work really well. They're very popular with wine geeks like me, winemakers, MWs, people like us. And people who are acid junkies, really love these wines because they are such high acid wines, particularly the dry versions. Ian Cameron is texting me and watching along. Hello, Ian Cameron. How are you? I'm so glad that you're watching and you picked up that we were doing this. 1959 demi-sec. Are you drinking that? You're not drinking those now, I hope. No, I think. So Ian's sending me pictures of wines that he tasted in 2018 at Pichot. He had the 1990 Pichot Sec, the 1964 demi-sec, and the 1959 demi-sec, and we had the 2011 Larmes. So I was correct in my memory. I don't know if you'll be able to see. This doesn't always work when you hold your phone up to the camera, but can you see the color? That's the 1959 demi-sec that he's sent us a picture of, and it's got this gorgeous kind of pale amber color to it. That would have been very, very special. Thank you, Ian. Much appreciated. And these wines are looking just beautiful. Ian, while you're on the texts, if you're still there, can you tell me this Le Marigny, is this a very sweet style? I think it is, but it just says Vouvray on the label, so I'm a little bit confused. I didn't do enough reading ahead of time. I just found this when I was putting my Clos Berger into the fridge. I found that sitting there waiting for me to try, and I can't remember. I think I might have bought it from you. I'm wondering when I should drink it. So, Ian, if you could send me a text with that information, that would be very helpful. Okay, Craig, next break is Cab Franc, another one of my favourites. Craig. Indeed. Coddy's saying, Craig, you've already had your pick. Someone else's turn. So please, other people, throw your hat in the ring for the next break, which is not coming up for another 6 weeks, because next week we're starting box 4. I haven't finished talking about Vouvray, so don't worry. But we will have to fill in some time at some stage, so I think that would be good. Shell is coming back to Duolingo. I've started Italian and French in anticipation. Which Italian phrases will get us by during Drinks with Kate? And should we practice 2025? And should we practice our Italian? Yes, absolutely. Craig's definitely in the Loire with Cabernet Franc. Coddy, you get to choose what you want to drink. Seeing as how you've pulled Craig up, which I think is absolutely correct. I'm just going to put a big mouthful of tart in my mouth. Excuse me. It's too delicious. Hungry work, this talking. It might have been fiddly to make, but it's great food to eat while I'm talking to you, because it's so soft and unctuous. It just kind of disintegrates in my mouth and I don't have to chew it too much. Alison loves a Puy Fumé. So that might be something to think about. Alison, you're saying yours is becoming more creamy. You think it's a great food wine? Absolutely. And I think this wine, sorry, I'm just trying to multitask. As a food wine, it's really hard to go past Vouvray, which is why sommeliers love a Vouvray. David, asking about Saumur is not off topic. Saumur is also a lovely region in the Central Loire for Chenin Blanc. Vouvray tends to be more across the whole gamut of sparkling wine through to really sweet wine and everything in between. But you can get more of those things as well in Saumur. To be honest with you, I still need to learn a lot more about the sub-regions of Central Loire and the differences between the Chenin Blancs from those different regions. I've kind of concentrated on Vouvray because my friend Ian brings in some beautiful ones, and so it's kind of easy to access them, and it's also delicious to drink them, so it makes life super easy. Peter and Karen, can I do a brag about my 2090-day Duolingo streak, please? Certainly, absolutely, well done. In preparation for the Italian tour, how about a Fiano? Emily, that's a very good idea. Coddy's suggesting Gruneveltliner. So I think we've got, so Gruneveltliner and Fiano would be good for a couple of weeks in between box 4 and box 5. And there's also there's going to be a couple of weeks somewhere around there where I might be away and might have to, we might have to skip a week. So we'll look at all of that. Now we've Shell's got involved in the Duolingo chat, so I think I'll just let you guys do that in the background. I've got to say, though, I always find Duolingo is a great thing to do, but if you get a chance to, if you really want to understand a language and practice speaking it, I think watch some French movies with your subtitles, listen to some French music, and see if you can find a little French conversation or Italian conversation class that you can join, where you can just practice a little bit of saying the words that you're learning on your Duolingo. But it's great to be able to do it in the privacy of your own home and kind of work your way through it. I think that's great. Shell just discovered Gruneveltliner at Oman Wine Bar in Albert Park. Gruneveltliner is awesome and will be an amazing thing to talk about. So we're definitely going to do Gruneveltliner in between this box and the next one. David Inchley, we had a Domaine Le Petit Saint-Vincent Saumur Blanc, very much like the Domaine Pichot L'Electron. They are often very similar, and this is why I say I need to do more tasting and learn more about the differences between Saumur and Vouvray, because for me, they kind of they have they're all Chenin Blanc. They have that sort of electric acidity. They have that apple fruit character. Maybe Vouvray has a little bit more honey to it, but I think it depends on the producer. So maybe we need Ian Cameron to come and talk to us about it, because he spent a lot more time in those regions than I have, and sells a lot more wines from those regions as well. So dare I say, possibly a trip to France at some stage might not be a bad idea, and maybe we should go to the Loire, seeing as how we've got so many fans. Okay, team. I reckon we're getting towards the end. It's been actually a very lively chat, and I haven't answered Jeff's question yet. So Jeff wanted to know why people are not really growing Chenin Blanc in the eastern states of Australia anymore. I think that it just wasn't popular. It was done well and cheaply in the warmer climates of Western Australia. I'm racking my brains. I've been racking my brains through this whole presentation, and I've just remembered. So very famous producer Hortons. You might remember Hortons Dry White from many years ago. I can't remember what they call it now, but it's not called. No, actually, it was called Hortons Burgundy many years ago. Now it's called Hortons Dry White. That has a lot of Chenin Blanc in it, and that did a lot of damage to the reputation of Chenin Blanc in Australia generally. Not that Hortons White Burgundy / Dry White is a bad wine. It's just cheap and cheerful and simple, and not exciting to people who are looking for greatness in their wine. Light, easy drinking, gluggable, but not this kind of thing, not something that you could spend 40 minutes talking about and still have things to say. So again, in Australia, there was a lot of thought that Chenin Blanc was a second-rate grape variety. Bye, Jill. I think she's going to see her cat. It was cheap. It was super cheap. People drank a lot of it, and a lot of people thought, okay, that's all that Chenin Blanc can do. And, it astounds me again and again that people think that just because you can make cheap wine out of a grape variety, that's its only expression. But so be it. That's what happens in a developing wine drinking country, which Australia was back in the 80s and 90s. We've become more sophisticated as we go on, but there's a lot of people who just drink wine because it tastes nice and it's got a bit of alcohol in it. So, I think that's really interesting. So David Inchley's saying that Pimpernel does a good Chenin Blanc or a good Gruner Veltliner. So I'm getting a little bit confused now. I'm assuming you're saying Chenin Blanc, and I've not tasted the Pimpernel Chenin Blanc, but I look forward to tasting it. I was going to say, though, that there are a handful of people in around the Yarra Valley who are playing around with Chenin Blanc. Hunter Valley as well, there are people playing around with Chenin Blanc to good results. So I think that because so many sommeliers have introduced younger Australian winemakers to this kind of Chenin Blanc from the Loire that wasn't easily accessible in Australia 15, 20, 30 years ago, whereas it has been for the last 10 years or so, and has been really the darling. Chenin Blanc and Cabernet Franc are sort of the darlings of the sommelier scene in Australia and also in America. The Americans love these wines. So younger winemakers are wanting to play around with Chenin Blanc here. So we're going to see, I reckon, more and more good high-end Australian Chenin Blanc doing well. Peter and Karen are saying, when does France not sound good? Because Paul thinks France sounds good. France and Loire, that sounds very good. Yes, Hortons White Burgundy did have swans on the bottle. And it's still got swans on the bottle, I believe, even though it's called Dry White now. Although they might have revamped the packaging since I last saw it. It's been a little while. And Hortons made a straight Chenin Blanc as well. So yes, everyone started drinking somewhere, and a lot of people shell and I'm looping myself into your age group, even though I'm much older than you, our sort of generation got into white wine through Horton's White Burgundy or Horton's Chenin Blanc or Horton's Dry White, because it was the cheap, accessible white wine before New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc came along. So that's that part of that story. I feel like there's so much more that I could say about this Chenin Blanc, about the Chenin Blancs that you guys are drinking, about the potential for greatness from Chenin Blanc. But I think that, the wine is really kind of speaking very nicely for itself as well. It is, as we said, an amazing food wine. So drink more Vouvray, drink more Chenin Blanc, particularly the French stuff, but also the South African wines are beautiful. They're harder to get here in Australia, but there's a couple of specialist South African wine importers now, and I think Dan Murphy's is bringing in a bit themselves. So, and the South Africans deserve a bit of support because they had a really tough time during COVID and lockdown, and it was the only country in the world that I heard of that cigarette and alcohol sales were banned rather than made essential parts of getting through lockdown. So I think that was a shame for them. So drink more South African wine as well. We might do that too one of these days. Okay, Craig, next week we start box 4 with a doozy, the Moorooduc McIntyre 2011 Chardonnay. Kay, this one's for you. You asked when we were doing the 2011 Robinson Chardonnay if we could compare it to the McIntyre. I know it's a few weeks later, but that should still be fairly fresh in your memories, right? So we're going to do the 2011 McIntyre Chardonnay next week. I'm thinking that freshly shucked oysters might be good, but I have to talk to my oyster shucker whether he can come in and shuck oysters for us. So if we don't do it for those, we'll do oysters later on in the session. But the fresh oysters in winter are so beautiful. So I think that would be awesome. Next box with the bang, absolutely. Yusuf, I hope that things are going better for the South Africans with their wine industry now. There seems to be a lot of really excited talk about it these days, so we'll keep an eye out. You've used up your oyster budget, Craig? No, never. Secateurs Chenin Blanc at $30, best value for good quality Chenin from South Africa. Absolutely, Yusuf. That's a good recommendation. On that note, I'm going to say cheers to all of you. I'm going to say drink more Chenin Blanc, drink more Vouvray. Don't be afraid of demi-sec. It doesn't have to be scary. He is lying, Karen. You guys can save up a few more pennies for some more oysters for next week. It's all right, Fiona. I'll give you another option if you don't want oysters. And that reminds me that we still have some spots at the July lunch here on Sunday week. We're going to be celebrating the Olympics. We're going to have a little Olympian competition between Moorooduc Estate wines and French wines. We've got our Burgundy picked out to go with the French onion soup and to go with the McIntyre Pinot. Where I'm going shopping for Shiraz from the Northern Rhone tomorrow. It's going to be unreal. So if you can get yourselves here Sunday week for lunch, book in. It's going to be ace, and we might even have a little tiny sweet glass of Vouvray to finish the lunch, just as a special treat for all of us, which I think we all deserve at least once a week. Speaking of that, I will see you all next week. Take care. Cannot wait to see the rest of you. Can't wait to see you next week. I don't know what's going on in the chat. It's all getting a bit out of control. So love you all. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your Vouvray and your tarts. Cheers. Bye.